Right. We are recording here with Javen or Javin.
Jabbing.
Javin. Ah, I
Yeah,
was so close. I wanted to say Javin. Now we've got it right. We're here. How are you doing today, Javin?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I wanted to talk to you because you're you wrote this article, how a yoga instructor showed me the power of passion and changed my life forever. Now, I'm somebody who engages, like, I think pretty much everybody. When I look at a young black man in the military, I don't think this guy is a perfect candidate for being receptive to the power of passion in yoga. So, can you tell me a little bit about that experience? Was that something you were naturally attracted to, or other people encouraging relationships that you had, pushing you in that direction? Were you having resistance toward that? I'm not actively involved in yoga. How is that something one and done? Is that a continuous practice that you have? Actually, my first interview I ever did on this Substack was with a yoga practitioner. So we're kind
Huh.
of coming back to that theme. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your relationship with yoga.
I was someone who was never really into mindfulness and yoga and that whole space. Like, I was introduced to it first in high school, and I was very skeptical of it. I didn't think it was very helpful. And then in 2022, I started talking to a girl that I met online, and she's a yoga instructor and invited me to go to one of her classes. She was teaching at this studio in Brooklyn, and it was her first like actual like commissioned class. So she wanted me to be there, and I wanted to be there to support her, despite not like enjoying yoga at all. And I was just really there for her, and being there and seeing her interact with all the people in the community and actually doing the yoga as well. I felt very relaxed afterward, and I'm from New York, so the change in pace from like going to work in construction and doing all of that to like just spending time with yourself and stretching and all of that, it was a good shift for me. And like, I'm someone who works out, so the stretching aspect of working out was something I'd always neglected, for lack of a better word. And I just would just work out and was always very tense. And starting to go to yoga with her and stretch was a lot of fun for me. And it changed my life, and it changed my perspective on like all these things that I had once thought like, okay, this is just something that like I don't do. Like, people like me, I don't like think that's for me. But it made me want to start trying new things and actually figure out what I truly enjoy doing rather than what I expect.
Interesting. You also have an article. I think that's kind of in that vein of maybe going outside your comfort zone. How going out solo on Halloween changed my life. There's a lot of life changing
Yeah.
occurrences happening from simple experiences, but I think maybe I'm what a party pooper here, but I haven't really done anything with Halloween in a while. I'm just a kind of a straight edge, not much of a party person in general. So yeah, what is the value of going out solo on Halloween and are I guess the first thing I think of is like introvert versus extrovert people who are, able to just throw themselves into a crowd and make conversation with strangers versus like, I need my friends to like support me in case, not just rejection from women, but just generally feeling out of place. That's really hard when you're alone versus you have buddies there to back you up and so on. So, how did you? I think a lot of people actually would have social anxiety about going out alone. Um, yeah, how did you overcome that, and what was the experience like?
So I'm definitely someone who I would say has struggled with social anxiety in the past. Like, when I was younger in high school and even a little bit earlier, I was always someone who, if I was going out, I wanted to go out with friends, and like I didn't feel comfortable like starting a conversation with like the cashier at a grocery store, things like that. I would see my friends do that, and I'd be like, well, it's just not for me. I'd be the guy standing off to the side, But over time, I kind of learned and realized that there's a lot of value in that, and it can be useful to be able to spark up a conversation with anyone, whether it's for making like connections and networking, or just like it's just more fun. I think now that I do it more often, and I first started doing that, I would go to the park and I would bring my chessboard, which is kind of like a free opener. People would come up to me and ask to play a chess game, and I'd start playing with them. And at first, I would just like pretty much play silently, just there by myself, just playing the game with them. But over time, I started like having conversations, and in New York, you meet people from all kind of different backgrounds. So it was cool to meet people from like a wide variety of states and all over the different countries. And so that night, when I was supposed to go out on Halloween, I was going to go out with one of my buddies. He had a party that he was going to go to, and then he had to cancel on me. He had like a family emergency, and I was like at a loss. I didn't really have any plans, and something just came over me, and I was like you can just go out by yourself. Like it's Halloween, why not? Like, and I am someone who really likes to go out and like if I'm gonna go out, I'm gonna go out and drink and talk to people and try and have like as much fun as I can and not worry about the next morning as much. And so that was kind of my plan going into it. I was gonna go out and just have fun. And so I didn't even have like a Halloween costume that night. I just like had a black button down, some white pants, and put on some dress shoes and a bow tie. And I was like, all right, this is I don't know what this is, but this is going to be my costume for the night. And I went down to like 72nd Street, an area that I kind of knew at the time, and was going through different bars. And it was Halloween night, and so I was expecting a lot of. It was the day after Halloween, and I was expecting a lot of young people to be out. And every bar I went into was just like people like over 30, like 40-year-olds. This is just not my crowd. So I went into a few places and I didn't like what I saw. So I went further downtown around NYU, the college areas, and that was when I started seeing a lot more people around my age. And I went into a few bars there, and still I wasn't talking to very many people, but little by little, the little interactions kind of like warming up the engine, like get the grease going through the parts and all of that. And then I went into a bar. I can't remember where exactly it was, but I went into this bar, and there was a party going on in the back room. And so like I poked my head in, and there was a bouncer there who said there was a cover fee for like $25 or something like that. And so I paid it and went in, and lo and behold, it's this girl's birthday party. And I was like crashing this law student's birthday party. And I introduced myself to a few people, and they kept asking me like, "Oh, who do you know here? Like, what do you study? All these things." And I wasn't going to school. I didn't know anyone at the party, and I just told them that pretty much. I was like in an era of like I just answer whenever someone asks me a question, I try and answer honestly. So I just answered honestly, and everyone thought it was actually pretty cool, which kind of surprised me. I thought people would be kind of hesitant, like, "Oh, who's this guy crashing the party?" and such and so on. But the response I got was pretty nice, and I ended up meeting a few people. Met this one girl who was waiting to see a guy that was coming in, and she was like, "Oh, like how do I look? Do I look good?" and all this. And I was like, "Yeah, you look great. Like you're good." And then I saw her about half an hour later with that guy, and I was like, "Hey, Mark, what's going on, man?" Like pretending like I knew him and stuff. It kind of embarrassed her, but it was a fun little interaction. And then the guy, Mark, was like, "Oh, have you introduced Javin to your friends?" And she was like, "No, like I she introduced me to her three sorority sisters, and we ended up going to a club downtown, and we had like a whole night. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, the ability to I think that's the moment where there's kind of a brick wall for a lot of people, and I would feel there's a risk of rejection when you go into a social space where you assume there's a hierarchy of value. They go to law school, they're have a certain social position, and if I don't fit into that, there's going to be this sense of ew, like what are you doing here? Why are you intruding upon us? And I think oftentimes that expectation that we have of social rejection, I mean, sometimes it is real, but oftentimes I think social rejection is mutual. People are rejected because they expect to be rejected, and they project anxiousness and a bit of shame about not being good enough to fit in with the crowd. And people see that, they smell that. They, when somebody is acting in a low confidence way, that is what is ew. That is what is rejected, not the actual social qualifier. You can walk into a hotel in America and not have a reservation, but if you confidently walk into the hotel, people aren't going to be like, yeah, some hotels, but a lot of people will just be, how you doing or whatever. So yeah, a lot of the senses we have about, I think there's more self-policing of people kind of rejecting themselves from interacting with others than there is actual people getting rejected by others. Once you move out of like your insular situation, now you have a high school and everybody knows each other, you got cliques and tribes and so on, then maybe that from that basis of experience, people are projecting that out into the world. But like you said, in America, you got people from all over the country, people from different states. Even within a state, you move from a rural area to an urban area or vice versa. So basically, anyone who goes to college or moves for work or job or family or whatever, everybody finds themselves in a new situation where their norms might not be the norm, and there's going to be some kind of translation necessary. But yeah, I think everybody is going to have to deal with that eventually, because even if you say, no, I'm never going to leave my hometown, I'm always going to be with my hometown friends, and I'm never going to have to, go out there, put myself out there. It's like, well, your hometown in this modern era is probably going to change. Whether you go out into the world is going to come into your hometown, whether it's through the internet or politics or something bigger. And so you're eventually so you can either have a proactive relationship with the world and try to kind of be assertive and put yourself in new situations, or you can kind of be reactive and more fearful and insular. And I think your approach is very valuable. I wanted to also address an article you wrote about child rearing. Called "The Exhaustion That Fills You Up. Is Having Children Even Worth It?" This is something that I've spoken with some other people about as a tough question. I think for some people it's just a religious kind of dogma of, children are good, you have to have children. If you don't have children, you're a childless cat lady, or you're a worthless man, because the worth of a man is in his family. Kind of what sort of values were you raised with in terms of the value of family and carrying on the legacy of the family or the family name? And then, what sort of ideas are you deciding for yourself as far as what you want to do in the future?
I don't really know where my desire. I want to have a family, a big family. I'm not really sure where that came from exactly. I guess part of it could be my mom. Her mom had 7 kids and raised another 2 in the household. So my mom grew up with a lot of siblings. I have dozens of cousins. And in my family, it's just me and my brother. And when I was growing up, my brother and I, as brothers do, we fought a lot. And I sometimes, when I was growing up, wish I had someone else to go to when my little brother was pissing me off. I wish I had someone else to go to hang out with still and spend time with and stuff like that. But for I'm not sure. I've always known that I wanted to have kids since I was maybe like 10, 11, 12. I went to a summer camp that I felt really welcome there. And I just remember, like, the earliest memory I can remember of wanting to have kids is when I was 11 or 12, and I made a promise to myself that I would send my kids to camp. And I was thinking about it a couple years later. I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, I never really thought about having kids before, but it's just kind of something that I've always known that I wanted, and I'm not really sure where it comes from. But I think that I've always enjoyed being around children and playing with kids, and I just think there's a lot that you can give to kids, and I'm someone who likes to give a lot, so I think that might have something to do with it as well.
Yeah, the idea that there's somebody who needs you and that gives you a purpose. I think that's something, a reason why a lot of people go into the military, because they don't necessarily know who needs me, or what purpose I have. And the military will tell you very quickly what you need to do and what your purpose is. Um, and and children will also do that. They will tell you what they need. I mean, you might not really understand what they're crying about, but you know that they're crying about something. You know that they need something, and you are the person who's responsible to provide that. So that makes sense to me. Um, I
What
think
about
that.
you?
What about me? Okay. For my part, I think that as a child, I saw, I thought about children. I remember being like 12 years old and thinking about having kids. And for me, it was always posed in terms of redemption, because there were things about my upbringing that I felt were tragic, or that needed to be healed. And I thought that for me, the purpose of having children would be a sense of victory or overcoming, that I was able to, in a sense, I believe that, my parents or my grandparents at some point along the line, they had an intention, and for whatever reason, they weren't able to actualize it, either because they didn't have the right knowledge or the technique, or there was something missing there. And so the idea of being able to make that whole for my children would then mean that it was all worth it, like the struggles that my parents went through, or my grandparents. Looking back at my family history, I see struggles of life and death, and situations where it would have been easier just to die, just to give up. And, when you come into contact with something that's very violent and very painful, a lot of people will choose to give up at a certain point. And when I think about the fact that I'm here today, I think that it's a result of making a difficult choice to survive when that wasn't easy. And so that's part of it, as well as is trying to give meaning to what is otherwise kind of a senseless life of sacrifice. Like, why did my grandfather sacrifice so much? Why did he work so hard? Why did he do the things that he did, which didn't bring him, I mean, it might have brought him a pleasure in terms of being a workaholic, but what was the logic behind that? And many people say, well, it was to provide a better future for his children. He didn't want his children to have to go through those same experiences. He wanted them to have a better life. And it was interesting for me to see intergenerationally that contrast between having no education, having a third grade education, and by any outward appearance not having the status of an intellectual, not having the status of, almost a literate person. And then seeing that he provided those material conditions where his children could get an education, and looking at, okay, now they had that education and they were out, they were liberated from that physical struggle, and they had more opportunities. But there's almost like kind of what your article is getting to, is even just asking that question, should I have children? For my grandfather, that was never a question, even though there were times when there was not enough food to feed the children, or there were not medical services to save the life of a child who died. Um, there are so many people today who I think would say, if I was in a survival situation where there wasn't food or medical services, I would just choose to have an abortion. I would choose not to have a child, or I'd choose to use contraception or something. But that wasn't really a choice that was present in the minds of my grandparents. It was just a kind of reactive, like you're saying, there was no justification or rationality for it. It just was like humans reproduce. I mean, I think religion played a part there. And if they were interrogated, I think they would have said, be fruitful and multiply. God made us this way. There's a purpose and a plan for our lives, and this is part of it. We don't understand it, but we're just trying to be good Christians or something. So, yeah, that then transforms in generations of the 1960s, where you get oppositional to religion. And when you don't have that authority to fall back on and say, well, it's in the Bible somewhere, or, well, talk to the pastor about it. When you have to kind of make up things on your own, and you're just looking at society for cues to tell you, what am I supposed to do? What am I needed for? What's my duty? What gives me status? What makes me a good person? There's so many different answers. And if you try to come up with like the one perfect answer, a lot of people, they go toward money, or they go toward education, they go toward status. And a lot of those things conflict with having children. A lot of really intelligent, moral people that I speak to, they say, well, I'm in my 20s, and I probably need 10 years until I'm ready to have kids. And it's like, that's an interesting perspective. And I do want to be nuanced about it, because that's not entirely different from how it was in the past, in the sense that, people would get married at 24, 26 years old. They weren't all just getting married at, 17 or 19 or whatever. But that was largely because most people were poor. They couldn't afford to have kids. And so they would have to basically work apprenticeships, build up their skills, build up money, whatever. They would work as indentured servants. A lot of people were just maids or manual laborers or whatever, working in a house. They'd live in a spare bedroom or something, and they'd do that for a decade of their life before they had enough saved up that they could form a family. So I don't think this is an entirely new thing, but I do think that in the past there was greater regularity of, you are upper class, you are lower class, this is your position in society, here's what you do. And remarkably, I think in the West, when we compare it to other cultures, like, for instance, in India, there's much more arranged marriage. So even that you don't even get to pick who you're going to marry, that's already chosen for you when you're a very young age. In the West, it's like, we get the opportunity to choose our partners, but the idea that we can choose when we have them, if we have kids with them, how many kids we have with them, all of those choices, leaving that up to the individual, I think it creates, we generally think of having more choices as a form of power and liberation, but oftentimes I think that choice brings with it fear and paralysis. So that's something I struggle with. Is there have been times in my life where I had a girlfriend, and I kind of always have had this mentality of, don't date a woman that you would be mad if she got pregnant, kind of thing. Like, maybe you would be worried. You'd be like, I don't have the money. But, like, don't date a woman where you'd be like, she'd be a bad mom or something. Date a woman where you would be like, you know what? I think she's going to be she's going to be a good mother for my children.
I think it's interesting that a lot of people today don't date with that priority as well. It's a lot of relationships today are more based on, oh, we have such and such in common, and that's why we get along, or like just proximity or whatever it may be. And I think that's like another part of why a lot of people either choose not to have kids or don't want to have or want to wait a very long time to have kids because they get enough sort of fulfillment from just having a career in the relationship. Jordan Peterson says this thing where he says there's three things that you need in life: a relationship, a career, and family. And you need at least two of those. And I think a lot of people choose to leave the children one out of it because there's so many options now in like what career you can do. You don't have to necessarily work a physically laborious job that isn't fulfilling now. You have all these intellectual, artistic opportunities that you can try and chase for your career. Obviously, there's less of a chance that you'll have success in those fields, but the pursuit of success in those fields is fulfilling enough for a lot of people to say, "Oh, I can wait to have kids because I'm chasing X or I'm chasing Y."
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people don't know why they're doing what they're doing and why they're choosing the goals that they're choosing. And I think most people, there is a sense of terror and panic when you say, is this really what you want to do? Like, really, you want to spend the next 5, 10, 15 years of your life doing this thing in particular? And it's like, you ask most people and they say, like, I didn't think I had a choice. I just thought that's what normal people do. Like, everybody goes to college, or everybody, in my family, this is how we do it. And if I don't do it this way, people are going to think I'm a failure or I'm not good enough. It's very hard for people to come up with independent goals because it's not just the question of maybe I could fail. Like, let's say I want to be a competitive athlete and every day I train to be a competitive athlete. And then, I enter a competition and I realize, you know what? I tried my best. I gave it 100%, but I just can't, I don't have the natural aptitude of these other guys. And so I'm just never going to be on that level. And so the goal that I chose for myself, it's all been a waste. I just wasted all this time and it was the wrong goal. That's not what I should have been doing. And the fear, it's not just of failing at a particular task, but it's the idea that, like, what am I born to do? What is my natural aptitude? What is my potential? What am I called to do? And a lot of people don't have that burning passion or fire in their heart, or if they do, oftentimes it's like they view it as silly, or it's not utilitarian, it doesn't make money, or other people wouldn't respect it, other people wouldn't get it. That's been a big thing I've experienced is people say, hey, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm a Substack writer. And it's like, well, do you make money? What is that? Like, do you write for the New York Times? Like, most people don't on the street, they don't know what that is. And so there is a sense of pride where it's easier to maybe do something normal or say, well, I'm a lawyer. Okay, everyone knows what that means, and you get a sense of respect from that. If you say something and people don't even know what it is, okay, am I a weirdo now? Are people going to accept me? And I guess the reason why I've come to the position that I have is because I feel that I tried to do the socially acceptable thing for a while. And while I was doing that, I was never satisfied in saying, you know what, I'm happy to do this for the next 15 years of my life. It was always, I'm doing this now so I can get my money so that someday I can do the thing I actually want to do. And I always had these side projects. I always had these creative projects. I always wanted to express my ideas and communicate. But I never dedicated myself to that 100%. It was always a side project. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who do it that way. Like, there are authors who they have a job as a security guard and then they write the novel on the side, For me, I feel like I wake up in the morning and I've got one important thing I can do every day. Like, I can wake up and I can either work my job, and then if I have time, I can do something else, but a lot of times I don't. Or I can wake up and I can work on my passion. And it's like, for me to really get in the zone and to dedicate 100% to something, it's like a 4-hour block of time with, you got to put some cushion on either end for distractions, getting in the zone. Okay, I know I want to write today, but what do I want to write about? All of that stuff. It's not just time, but it's it's focus and it's transitioning. I don't know. A lot of people use terms like ADHD or Asperger's, or they'll use these different terms to describe like the struggles that everybody experiences with focus. And the fact that so many college students are on Adderall because they're like, well, I need to focus for this stuff. It's like, okay, I mean, no judgment, but if you are truly passionately into that subject, and I've experienced that. I don't always experience it, but I have experienced those times where I'm like, I know what I have to write, and I will sit down for 8 hours, and I will not stop and I will not get distracted. And I don't feel that like need to go check social media because I'm in the zone, I'm in the flow, and that's where I know I'm supposed to be. Now that is the ideal. And the people, I think the people who are the most successful are the ones who actually are able to access that part of themselves as much as possible to like maximize that I know where I'm supposed to be feeling for the majority of their life. And the people who are the least successful are those who are like, where am I? Why am I doing this? And they have to constantly remind themselves, oh, I'm doing this for money. I'm doing this for, and when I say success or failure, I don't mean money, but I mean like at the end of your life, looking back and saying, did I do what I was supposed to do? Because, a lot of people think that they're supposed to make all this money because, and I talk to a lot of people who say like, well, the reason I go to college and the reason I choose this career is to get this money because without money, I can't support the family I want the way I want to. But then a lot of those people just end up lonely, divorced. If they have kids, their kids hate them. They don't have a good relationship with their kids. It's like, wait a second, your priorities is totally upside down. You put all this work and energy into a job that you hated to support a family that you didn't even end up giving time for to make it work. So what is the point of having all that material to put toward the family if you haven't got the fundamentals of the emotional relationship and so on? So, yeah, I find it very sad that there's like an assumption that, oh, yeah, if I have my money figured out, then the family will just fall into place. Or it's like you almost have to do it in reverse. You kind of have to like put the family first and then like fit in the money where you can. But, maybe there are other people for whom they'd say, like, you can't even plan those things. You can't plan what type of family you're going to have. It's just going to happen. You think your kids are going to be one way, and then they turn out a completely different way, and you can't plan everything out. It's just life is what it is. But originally what you talked about, and I want to kind of finish on this note, is that awareness of, are you even aware? Because you can't plan for the future. You can't predict the future. But are you aware of what you're doing, or are you trapped in a dysfunctional cycle where you're doing something that doesn't work, but you're doing it because it's familiar and it's what you did yesterday and it's easier than trying something new? What you're talking about in these like small things, these aren't like, you're not doing anything crazy here. You're doing some yoga, you're going to a Halloween party, but like in those moments, the awareness to hop out of the comfort zone, to hop out of the habit, to try something new, to be experimental. I think that is the way that you deal with unpredictable future. And, we can't plan 10 steps ahead. Like in chess, sometimes like you just have to, I think that's a great metaphor for it is, you're about to make a chess move. Now, you could plan 10 steps ahead on just one opening line or something, but are you aware of all the different pieces on the board? Because if there's that one bishop in that corner and you're not aware of what that bishop's doing, it's about to take your queen. Even though you had this genius plan for all these other pawns and stuff, you didn't notice that bishop on that queen. So you have to give each piece on the board awareness. You can't hyperfixate on something and then neglect everything else and say, oh, I'm going to have this perfect plan, because, well, there's too many variables in life to respect your perfect plan. Something's going to come in and mess it all up. So just having that awareness of, where am I? What am I doing? at my core, at my essential, like make things simple. What do I want out of this situation? I think that's very important. But I want to give you the last word. Concluding thoughts. If there's anything you're working on or people you want to shout out, I want to give you the floor to do so.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for reaching out. When I started Substack, I started it in June, I believe, of this year. I didn't really think much of it. Like you, I've always wanted to express my ideas. That's kind of what I'm passionate about, is grappling with ideas and finding ways to communicate those well. And so when I started Substack, it was more of just something for me to practice my writing skills and actually publish it somewhere. Because before that, I tried to do YouTube and it didn't go as well as I'd hoped. I don't have the presence on camera and the ability to like be animated on camera all the time like other people do. And I realized that quickly after I started doing it. And I just wasn't as passionate about talking about things, especially because I didn't spend the time writing about it and really deeply thinking about it first. I was just kind of reading off a script that I'd written up quickly, because with YouTube, you have to keep posting pretty regularly. So I wasn't really equipped for that. And so when I came to Substack, I found a nice happy medium, something that I found fulfilling in the idea space. And then I mean, I wouldn't say it's taken off. I have like 60 subscribers, but for me, it's taken off. I didn't expect this at all at this time. And then when you reached out, I was super excited. So just appreciate it and thank you. And I don't really have anything to plug, but I'm just looking forward to continue writing and hoping people check it out.
Awesome, Javin. Appreciate your time. I'm sure once I get through these next 60 scheduled interviews I have, we'll be able to wrap around, and I bet by that time you'll have more than 60 subscribers. But people who are watching it, obviously, go subscribe and give them a little boost there. Everybody starts somewhere. I mean, I also, there was a point I didn't even have 60 subscribers. So when you're kind of writing in that, it's a low intensity environment, but it's also like you really have to be you have to like love what you're doing, because there's not a lot of external motivation. It has to come from within. But anyways,
yeah,
I appreciate the conversation, and I hope we can talk again sometime.
Yeah, have a good day.
All right, take care. Bye-bye. All right, that's Javin. That was a very personal talk. That was a very personal conversation. I always tell people, hey, feel free to ask me any questions, and most people don't take me up on that offer. But he writes about his own life, and so, it's one of the few opportunities where I think someone would feel comfortable asking me those sort of questions. And I rarely feel it's appropriate for me to kind of talk about those things. But, every time and place. But it kind of made me, it made me consider, it made me wonder if I'm sufficiently aware of what I'm doing. Like, do I even know what I'm doing? Or am I just kind of, living life in a series of habits? And unfortunately, I do have habits, I do have habits of thought, and I do have fears, and it is hard for me to go to a party where I don't know anyone and introduce myself. And I think it's less of it is a fear of rejection, but it's also kind of a sense of superiority of like, oh, these people probably aren't interested in the things I'm interested in. They probably like sports, and they probably have dumb opinions or something, and that makes it hard to walk into a party and enjoy myself. And so I admire, he's not an extroverted person, but I admire that kind of like love of humanity, go with the flow, just kind of enjoy the presence of other people. It's hard for me to achieve that, but I see the value in that human connection. So I maybe doing these interviews is my attempt to establish human connection with people in a period of my life where I'm not going out to parties. I've been very on my grind set, I haven't been traveling, haven't been meeting people, which is difficult. And so, yeah, to talk to somebody like that, I enjoyed it. I don't know if people are going to listen to this and think, well, this is mind blowing philosophy, politics, religion, archaeology, anthropology. Maybe it wasn't the typical podcast episode, but this is a variety show. We try to get people, all sorts of walks of life. That's the intention. I ultimately do want to kind of, I know that these episodes don't get as much views as my articles. My articles often get minimum of 400 views, often 500, 600 views. A lot of these interviews get like 300, 400. So I noticed that the interviews, people don't like the interviews. They don't want to watch the interviews. They're not interested in the interviews. But I do them on the off chance there's one person impacts them. Honestly, to impact the person I'm talking to is enough. To impact me is enough. That's already two people. And then if there's one person in the audience who's impacted, that's a win. So I don't do it because it's commercially successful or because it's for everybody. Obviously, I can't, unless I did the same episode over and over again. The episodes are never going to appeal to all the people. But yeah, maybe there's someone out there who thinks, "Hey, I didn't think you thought about these things. I didn't think of you. I didn't think that was a part of you." But this is a relationship. This is me forming relationships, even just, not deep, not even friendships, but introductory. I think that the process, that dynamic is good. That's what I'm trying to practice with this. I'm trying to go to the Halloween party. I'm just doing it on Substack rather than going to the club and paying the cover fee, which I don't think I'll be doing anytime soon. I'm just a big nerd, guys. I'm just a big nerd. I walk into the club and I'm like, oh, I'm a nerd. I don't belong here. I belong on Substack. This is my home on the internet. So anyways, guys, I appreciate you checking it out. Do check out his Substack and obviously like, comment, restack. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.